Hello and welcome to Mastering Large Projects in CET. My name is Destiny Trowbridge and I am one of the training specialists with Configura. Today we're going to be talking about some system requirements and recommendations when you are working with these large projects. We're going to talk about configuring your control panel to best suit these types of projects. We'll go over some best practices when we are using CAD drawings and SketchUp files. Then we'll talk a little bit about some CET functions in the drawing view, how we can manage large groups of objects. And then we're going to wrap up with a few Photo Lab tips and tricks for rendering. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about today is system requirements. The system requirements are available on the Help Center. So if you look here, we have the image of the Help Center, and it's about halfway down the page. There is a section that says System Recommendations. If you click on that in the Help Center, it's going to take you to our System Recommendations page. So there's all kinds of information there. But for large projects, the range that we're looking for is going to be this high-end recommended for large projects or virtual reality range. So when you take a look at this, there's a few things that we are really looking for. We're looking for a graphics card with a benchmark score of 25,000 or higher for these larger projects. So a benchmark test is a test that measures how well your GPU performs under stress. You can Google GPU benchmark if you're unsure of what your specific GPU score is. And if you're unsure of what GPU you have, you can actually see it in the control panel in CET. I'll show you that in just a moment when we get into our control panel configuration. The other things that you want to make sure of are making sure that you have adequate memory and disk space, making sure that you have a suitable processor. And then the last thing that I like to let people know is that some docking stations can cause some problems. They may prevent CET from detecting your graphics card, and this will cause the program to switch into software compatibility mode, and that will negatively affect the performance of CET. So you do want to make sure that you have an appropriate docking station if you are using one, but really be careful with those because there have been some problems. So be aware of that. All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is our control panel configuration. So I'm going to swap into CET for this, but what we're going to look at is our angle step. We're going to talk about multiple drawings. We're going to talk about enabling levels of detail in real time, as well as those real-time lights and smooth textures. And then we'll talk a little bit about auto backup and auto save. Okay, so here we are in CET. So in CET, to get into your control panel, you're going to go up to the File menu. And then down here on the bottom left is your control panel. So just left click to open that up. And we'll start here in the General tab. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about here is the angle step. That is this option right here. So the angle step is the degree of rotation for when you're placing objects and rotating objects. So the lower the number is here, the harder CET has to work while you are rotating and manipulating objects. Let me go ahead and just bring in a wall so you can see what this is going to look like. Move that out so it's not in the way here. Okay, so I have a wall in my drawing. Now if I grab this rotation node, left click and drag, I can rotate this wall. Now notice that CET is only representing this every 45 degrees. So CET doesn't have to work too hard to be able to represent that in these different places. However, if I bring this down to a lower number, as I grab this rotation node and spin it around, CET is needing to actually graphically represent this in every single 1 degree. So that's a much bigger ask on the program. If you have this set for a larger number and you find yourself in a situation where you need to rotate to a different degree of rotation, all you have to do is hold down your Shift key and that will unlock the snap, and you can place that at any rotation you would like. But for the best practice, we recommend that you use a higher number here. Some people find that working with 90 degrees is plenty, and when they do their rotation, that is going to be suitable for most of their needs. And then they can hold the shift key to override if they need to turn something in a different degree of rotation. I keep mine set at 45 degrees, and that tends to work perfectly for me. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is also in our General tab, and that's going to be this Enable Multiple Drawings. Now, this is an option that we like to let people know about. It is how you can copy things from one drawing to another drawing. But if you are working with very large drawings, this can sometimes be problematic because CET might already be struggling to represent everything that's in your drawing already. If you are kind of pushing those limits of your PC already, and if you ask it to open another drawing, especially if it's another large drawing, there could be some significant slowdowns. So if you're intending to work with very large projects, or if you are working on one very large project, it might be a good thing to turn this off while you are working with that one project. If you have Enable Multiple Drawings off, you will not have this Drawings drop down. This will go away completely. And if you open another drawing in CET, instead of it opening here within the same window of CET, there will actually be a whole nother iteration of CET that will try to open. So just be aware of that. Again, you do want this on if you want to copy from one drawing to another. You want to be within the same window of CET. You can swap between drawings here. So if I start a new drawing, it will be completely blank, and if I go back to that first drawing, I can copy something from one and put it into the other. So here's the blank drawing. I can paste into this other drawing. So if you do need to copy and paste, you are going to want to have that Enable Multiple Drawings on. However, it's a good idea to not have this on if you are working with extremely large projects, just in case you accidentally try to open several of these large projects all at once. That can cause CET to really slow down. Okay, next let's go down to our Graphics tab. So this Graphics tab, this is where you can see that GPU information. So if you're unsure of what your GPU is, it is listed here in the top section of the Graphics tab of the control panel. From here, you're going to double check this to make sure that this is suitable for your needs. So check out that benchmark score, make sure that this all fits within our system recommendations. And then down here in the settings, we are going to talk about a couple of these options. So you want to make sure that you're always in this hybrid mode. If you do not have a suitable GPU, you are going to be running in the software mode, and you're not going to be able to really do the renderings and represent these objects graphically the way that they are intended. The next few options here are Enable Levels of Detail in Real Time. We're going to go ahead and turn that on, make sure that that check mark is on. What that does is it allows a smaller level of detail when things are zoomed out and a larger level of detail when things are zoomed in. So let's go ahead and bring in something with some detail on it. I'll go ahead and bring in one of these poly bags. So as I'm further away, I don't have a ton of detail, but as I get closer, this detail is becoming clearer. Now, if I have this turned off, it's going to have the same level of detail the entire time. So you see that this is the same here, even when I zoom out. So CET is working a little bit harder to represent this because that same level of detail is present. However, when we have this enable levels of detail in real time checked on. As we zoom out further, we are losing that detail. And then as we zoom back in, we are gaining it. So now imagine this polybag multiplied across all of the different products that you might have in CET. You can see how CET will have to work much harder to represent that level of detail when you have many things within your drawing view. So make sure that you have this checked to keep that enable level of detail in real time. The next option is the enable smooth textures. So this one is similar. This allows the 3D view to be a little bit more smooth and to have these smooth textures as you are working. Now this only affects the 3D drawing view. It does not actually affect your renders. So when we turn this on, you're not even really going to see a difference, but CET is working much harder to be able to give this option. So when we have many things in our drawing and we turn this enable smooth textures on, again, CET is having to work really hard to represent that. And you'll notice that it really isn't making much of a difference to me here. There are some things that really stand out. If you have a panel system for office furniture and the panels have a fabric finish on them, a lot of the fabric finishes will really be affected by this enable smooth textures. Those fabric finishes will look much more crisp and clean with this turned on. However, again, this is only in the 3D drawing view. When you go to do your renderings or you go to actually put this into your paper view by using some view clips, you're going to end up with that finished product that looks the same. All that this is doing is changing it in your 3D view. This can help CET from experiencing slowdowns. The next option is this enable real-time lights. If we have any lights in our drawing, this is going to allow us to preview what those lights will look like. So if I bring in OmniLight into my drawing, let's go ahead and turn this on now. Now you can see where that light is shining and what that's going to look like in my drawing. And as I move this light around, you can see that change happening immediately. Now imagine that you have a ceiling with a light grid in it in your drawing, or you have many different types of lights in your drawing. You can see where this can kind of be a big ask for CET. So my recommendation is that you keep this off while you are designing, unless there is something specific you want to check for shadows or lighting purposes, but then be sure to turn it back off when you are done. This can be a good tool to double check those types of things, but it is not good to have this turned on while you are designing in CET. Another thing to keep in mind here is that if you have done some renderings and you've brought in a type of rendering, if you've tried to set up a type of rendering that has a sun involved and that sun is still active in your drawing in those renderings, when you go to turn this enable real-time lights on, it's going to make this all appear like a black profile of whatever the objects are within this drawing. You're not going to be able to actually see them, and that is because you have this enable real-time lights on and there is a sun active in your drawing that is creating a kind of visual disturbance there. All right, so be sure that you keep that off. That's going to help speed CET up quite a bit. All right, moving right along, we're going to go down to this data management tab. So the data management tab is where you can set up your auto backup and your auto saves. So these are both more for general computer slowdowns instead of CET specific slowdowns. But if you find that you are running out of room on your computer, double check these. The lower the numbers here, the lower the space that you're going to be taking up on your computer, or wherever you are saving these files. But we do recommend that you do use both of these features because this will help save you from losing any work if you experience some kind of crash or some kind of problems in CET. You can go back and open up a backup drawing, or you can use a previously saved version. So these are both really good to have turned on. Just make sure that your numbers are on the lower side of the range. When you hover in these boxes, you're going to see a range listed. So right now I have the number of auto backups per drawing here selected as 8. The range is the number that appears below the 8. So you'll see that 1 through 50, that's the range. So the lower you go there, the less space it's going to take on your computer. So same thing here, we've got a range from 1 to 9 for the number of autosave files per drawing. And then the number of minutes between autosaves here can be between 5 and 90 minutes. Okay. Go ahead and close out of our control panel. And we will get back into our slideshow. Okay, next thing that we're going to talk about is some tips and tricks when you are working with CAD plans and SketchUp objects. So for CAD drawings, if you are able, what we are looking for is a CAD drawing that is 1 megabyte or lower. So if you have AutoCAD and you have the ability to clean up the CAD file prior to importing it into CET, that is the best case scenario. You're looking for a bare bones type drawing for your CAD drawing. So you want just the necessary information. If you are able, again, to use AutoCAD, you might want to use purge and overkill. You might want to also check your drawing limits, meaning make sure that there's not something drawn really far away in the CAD plan. Sometimes if you have things spaced out or there's a few pieces and parts really far away from the main portion of the CAD plan that you maybe really don't need and you have it in there as a reference, CET is going to see that as part of the drawing limits. So if you really don't need that when you're drawing in CET, it would be great to completely delete all of that from that CAD plan before you bring it in. If you don't need it, try to move it, out of the drawing. And if you do need it, try to move it closer to the main portion of your drawing. So that way your drawing limits are smaller. You can also delete layers that are not used. That can be helpful. And deleting hatching can also be really helpful in reducing that file size. If you are making a bunch of changes to the CAD plan before bringing it into CET, we do recommend that you save that as its own file just for use in CET. That way you still have the original file with all of the information included. All right. Next is for SketchUp best practices. So when you use the SketchUp extension and you access the 3D warehouse, there are going to be some things to keep in mind when you are using that 3D warehouse. We are going to want to check the file size and the polygon size of those files. So when you're working in SketchUp, you'll see that when you're working with the SketchUp extension and you are in the 3D warehouse, you will see that different models have different sizes. And depending on the size of the file, when you bring it into CET, you may get this large model warning. So if you are kind of over those limits, especially for your polygon size, CET is going to recognize this, and when you download that and try to bring it in, you're going to get this pop-up that says large model. And what it's doing is it's asking you if you would like to reduce your model size. Now this will not affect the rendered model. It will only change what the model is going to look like within the drawing view while you're working with it. If you get this pop-up warning and it asks you if you'd like to reduce the model, if you click do not reduce, you will almost certainly experience CET slowdowns. So please, every time, if you ever get this, click reduce. Again, it will reduce the file for your drawing purposes, but it will still render very well. And you can always try to reduce it and then do a render preview just to double check to make sure that things are going to render the way that you would like them to. This is one of our most common slowdowns in CETs when people bring in objects from the 3D warehouse and they click do not reduce for these larger models. So just be aware that if you are bringing these in and you click do not reduce, you are probably going to experience some type of slowdown. If you are able to find the models that you need within CET through our utility extensions, those ones are always going to be the best option, but sometimes there are things that don't exist yet in CET, so we are using that 3D warehouse to bring in those models. Again, just follow those best practices. We're looking for 1 megabyte or smaller for the size and 15,000 or less polygons when you are pulling in those models. Okay, next I have some tips and tricks for working with your large projects. So for this, we're going to talk about freeze, we're going to talk about layers, and then we are going to talk about filters. So let's go ahead and go into CET to demonstrate this. So here in my drawing, maybe I have a section that is going to be done with one type of product, and then maybe I have another section that's going to be done with a different type of product. I can go ahead and use some of these different tools to manage my project. The first thing we're going to look at is freeze. So let's say that you have something in your drawing that you know is causing a little bit of a slowdown. Maybe you have a very large SketchUp file. You can actually just right click on whatever that is in your drawing and then click freeze. And what will happen is you will get this little grayed square wherever the thing was that you froze. If you click on something that is frozen, you do have an option in the quick properties. You can choose to show that frozen thing, or you can just have this gray box. So if you click on the frozen gray box, you've got this option. So you can actually have things appear in 2D if you would like to still see that detail, or you can choose to just have it be a gray box. What this does is it allows CET to not have to represent that graphically. So as you're moving around, you know that it's still there, but as you're space planning, if you have this section already done, you can just freeze a whole section and then you can continue working without worrying about CET having to represent all of this. Now this does work for larger type areas of things as well. So maybe I have some palette racking in my drawing. Let's say that I've got a couple different systems. I'll go ahead and put a couple systems in. Maybe we've got this whole area of our drawing that we're working on right now, and we don't want to deal with this whole section. We can just grab everything that we don't want to see right now and then freeze it. And you can see that I've got these gray blocks everywhere where things are frozen. And you might notice that there's different colors of gray blocks. That is because the color is actually based on the size of the thing that you are freezing. The larger the object is that is frozen, the darker the gray will be. So now as we're working in CET, maybe I just want to work on this system. This whole area has been frozen and now will not be a burden on CET as I'm moving around and as I'm space planning. So you can freeze things like that. If there's a section of your warehouse that's maybe already done, or a section of your drawing that's already done, you can go ahead and freeze that down and not have to worry about CET working to represent that while you continue to work. Now, one thing about freezing is when you close CET and reopen it, the things that you froze before closing CET will remain frozen. So they will stay frozen until you are ready to unfreeze them, maybe for rendering purposes. Until you are ready to go for that, it's going to stay frozen. Now, if you want to unfreeze these, you can actually right click and go down to unfreeze. Or there's also a tool in the object drop down where you can click the unfreeze all option. We also have a keyboard shortcut for that. That is Control Alt E. So when you click that, it's going to unfreeze everything. So you can see that this section has also been unfrozen. Everything has been frozen. Now, if there's one particular area or one thing that you are working on, so let's say I've got this wall selected, I'm going to be working on maybe my walls, I can actually go in and click this Freeze Others button, and that will freeze everything else in my drawing except for my selection. So we've got a few different ways that we can work with this to help reduce any kind of extra work that CET is having to do. I'll go ahead and unfreeze all again before we move on to our next tip. Okay, the next thing to talk about is using our levels. So when you are working with levels, it's going to be more of an advanced tool. So this is actually located on the Architecture tab. Let's find my Architecture tab. When you're adding levels, make sure that you are not accidentally adding floor coverings. Make sure that you are using this Add Level tool. Our level overview is listed down here, and typically when people add levels, what's happening is they are going to be creating a second story or maybe creating a mezzanine type space, but levels can also be used to help control visibility within your drawing. So let's go ahead and add a level. So if I add a level to my space, let's go ahead and add it over here. I'm just setting this level in my drawing. I've got this space here, which is all my level 1. And if I select the level itself, you can see that I've got the option to change the height here. So maybe I want a 20-foot ceiling height. And I am on the ground. I've got an elevation of 0. Now, if I bring something into my drawing and I place it in this space, it will automatically be put into this level 1. Now if I go back to my levels, you can see I've got this level 1 has 341 objects right here. So now if I choose to turn off everything else, so let's say that this is what I'm working on right now. I've got this level 1 turned on. If I want to turn off the outside, so turning off everything else in my drawing while I'm working in this one section, all I have to do is left click on that outside button. So everything else that's in my drawing, anything that is not included in this level 1 area, I can just left click on it and it will turn off. So this can be a really useful tool for if you're doing a very large warehouse or a very large floor plan. If you've got a section that's already done, you can just make your level, whatever your section is that you're working on right now, and turn everything else off. So that can be a nice way to kind of manage those file sizes. When you are working with these, you can also make the active level change. And so right clicking on one of the levels is going to change your active level. So right now, if I were to add any product in, I'm on my outside level. This is the active level, so things would be added to that level. And if I right click on this level 1, things will be added to the level 1 space. And once again, you can turn off specific levels by left clicking down here on the bottom, or by clicking on the little eyeball next to it. You can even use that filter to kind of control what you are able to see within your space. You can use levels on different elevations as well. So if we had a level 1 here, you could go ahead and add another level on top of that if you needed to create another mezzanine type space. And then same thing, you could turn off the visibility for specific levels while you are doing that. Okay, the last tool within CET that I want to go over for kind of managing your visibility here is the filter. Oh, one thing to point out when you are working with levels, when you close CET and reopen CET, your levels will remain the same. So however you have this filtered using levels, if we have the outside one off, if you close CET like this and then reopen it, it's going to maintain this same type of visibility. So it's going to be easier to open because it isn't having to graphically represent all of these things all at once. So you might experience a little bit quicker opening if you only have a little bit active in your drawing as opposed to an entire warehouse or large drawing file. Okay, the last tool is going to be the filter tool. And our filter tool is in the tools dropdown. And this is the filter. So you can use filter to manage your visibility here within your 3D drawing view and your 2D drawing view as well. So if there's something that you want to turn off, for example, maybe we want to turn off our walls, we can actually go in and use this little crossed out eyeball to turn off the things that we don't currently want to see. So if we turn off our architectural category, we can manage our drawing that way. Now, this can be really helpful when you're working with large files. Let's say that you have a couple very large CAD files and you've already brought them in and maybe you've built your walls over them. You can filter off those CAD files so you're not actually seeing them while you're working anymore. Maybe you've added, the walls so you know where things need to be. You don't need that actual CAD file in your drawing at this point, but you do want it to still exist in your drawing. You just don't need it while you're space planning right now. You can filter that off. Same thing for the architecture. Maybe you've gone in and you've done your architecture everywhere, and maybe you still have your CAD plan showing and you don't actually need to see that architecture. Or maybe as you're trying to space plan, your walls are getting in your way as you're trying to do things. You can filter off that architecture by going in and turning off the category for the thing that you don't want to be able to see. Now the filter is temporary, meaning that if you close CET and reopen it, you are going to be back to seeing everything. So it's going to open with all of your objects in your drawing being visible. Okay, this is going to bring us to our next slide here. So for this section, we're going to talk about how we can help speed up our rendering and a couple tricks here. So the first thing to talk about is when you are using the Photo Lab. When you create your renderings in the Photo Lab, there is an option to save those renderings. So let me pop into CET and open up the Photo Lab here. Once you have rendered a window, let's say that I want to just do a quick render, something like this. We'll do product lighting and we'll just let it go for this particular section. Once you have something rendered, you can save it. So you're going to click this button right here. After this renders, I'll be able to click the button. But what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to save this as an image. So you can save it as a JPEG, you can save it as a PNG, however you want to save it. You're going to save this locally. And then when you open up your installation documents in your paper view, instead of using the photo insert that allows you to pull something directly from Photolab, you're going to open up an image, and then you're going to use that saved image. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to save this. I'll save this to my desktop, and we'll go ahead and just save this as a JPEG. So we've got this image saved now. I'm going to go ahead and close out of the Photolab. We do have this photo 1 ready to go in the Photolab. And then if I go down to my paper view and I start to insert some images, I've got the option to either insert an image, a saved image from a file, or to add a photo. So let's go ahead and take a look at these two different things. So the photo allows me to select a photo that's already been rendered in the Photolab, right? And if I double click on this one, it's going to allow me to select an image that's saved. So let's find that that image that we saved. Let's see this guy right here. So now these are the same image, right? It's exactly the same. But when you go to print this, when we do our print reports and we go to actually print this paper out, I'm going to go ahead and just have the paper views on, and I'm only going to have this one paper. If I do this create PDF, you'll see what happens. It's processing to print this, and then I'm actually getting a little render tasks pop up because we're having to re-render this one from the Photolab. So I'll bring this over. This is the document that was created. But what's happening is this one is already there ready to go, and then this one had to re-render in the Photolab. So when you are dealing with projects that have many paper pages, so maybe you're doing a bid project or something like that, and you have a huge amount of papers that you need to print, it can be really beneficial to you to save them locally and use this image insert to put that image in instead of using the Photolab. Photolab is going to need to reprocess that image to be able to print this to PDF. Whereas if you use an image that's already saved locally, it already has all the information that it needs right there to be able to print. So just something to keep in mind with that. Okay, the other thing to talk about for rendering is the Render Accelerator. So the Render Accelerator allows you to distribute your rendering work across multiple computers that are connected to the same network. So this makes use of computers that might be idling, and it really helps to reduce the time that it takes for renderings to complete. So what happens is you can download the Render Accelerator server from the marketplace. It is free, and the computer that's going to be having its resources borrowed will have that server downloaded onto it, and you just start the server up, and then you can get the Render Accelerator extension from the marketplace for the computer that's going to be doing that you're going to be drawing on. And then once you get that installed, you will just search for the computer that has the server already running on it. You'll put in the IP address for that server, and you'll be able to get that information from the computer that you are borrowing from. So it really allows you to speed up your rendering, and it really does help create kind of an easier process. I use my personal computer as my borrowed resources when I am working and doing renderings, especially when I'm doing things with large renderings. It doesn't harm anything on that end. All that it does is it really allows you to use the processing power for that from that computer. I have a pretty strong home computer, and then my work computer is a laptop, so I can leverage the strength of that PC to do my rendering, and I can get some really quick renders, high quality renders for much less time. So that is something to consider. If there's an office computer that is idling, that is maybe kind of a powerhouse, maybe you have especially maybe a graphic designer's computer, something like that, where it's not being used currently and can be borrowed for its resources. Render Accelerator is a really, really good tool to use for that. Okay, and we do have a couple minutes left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this bonus slide. So this bonus slide, this is for Collab Pro. So currently this is available for Material Handling Edition users. What this is it's intended to be a way for multiple people to collaborate on a project at one time. However, this can be used by just one individual, and so you'll be creating your drawing by using sections. I'm going to show you this little demo video of it, but think about this in terms of helping yourself with a large project. And this is going to work similarly to using levels, but instead of creating levels, we're actually going to be creating sections that are going to live on the cloud, and you can actually check out and edit different sections at a time. So you're never needing to have everything out all at once unless you really need to. All right, so I'll go ahead and play this video for you. So as this video is playing, you can see that this person is checking out different sections that were created. So this was created by different types of products. So you have a section for your machines, you've got a section for your conveyors, a section for your pallet racking, and so forth. And as this person is checking out these different sections, you'll see them appearing in CET. All right, so that is something to consider. The free version of Collab Pro can be used by one person for a couple of different projects at a time. So this can be a nice way to manage these really large projects. It is a little bit more involved, but if you are really struggling with some CET slowdowns, this can be a great way to manage those projects. All right. Well, that is everything that I have to share with you today. So thank you so much for being here for my breakout session. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email is destiny.trowbridge@configura.com. Thank you again, and I hope you have a fantastic day.